How's it going, Thieves fans? Today we have another episode of the Thieves Talk podcast. We are going to be talking about the first two matches the Thieves played of this Major 4 split, and we started off hot 2-0. We actually were able to finish one of our series with a 3-0, so that's great, something the Thieves have been struggling to do. Our first matchup, as you can see here, was against the Los Angeles Guerrillas, where we were able to beat them, but we took it to a game five. We were on the verge of a reverse sweep, which obviously not ideal, but as we've seen from the last major, this is kind of what the Thieves did a lot with taking it to a game five. I don't know what it is with them in game fives. They just seem to always go game five for some reason. But at least this one they were able to close out. And we'll get to the next match, but the next match was the Boston matchup where we were actually able to win a 3-0, which is the first in a while. So that's a really big accomplishment, even though it is against Boston Breach. As I said, we'll dive into that a little bit later. But let's start off with this matchup against the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Now, we've talked about this before because the Thieves have played LAG a few times this year already. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, just the Battle of LA, the Thieves tend to struggle against Los Angeles Guerrillas. And this is something that has been a historic thing, not just this year. If you go back and you look at the overall records throughout the CDL, I believe the Guerrillas have a winning record against the Thieves by a decent margin. So I don't know what it is. It's not like it was just this year, but we were actually able to get a win against them this go around, which is huge because there's some other teams that are same with Gorillas in kind of the running with making it to champs. And the Thieves need to be able to take wins where they can. And if the Thieves would have lost this match, they would have dropped below the Gorillas when it comes to trying to make champs. So this was a really big win on the Thieves part. Um, Obviously, Gorillas are not necessarily like the best team in the league, so I would hope that the Thieves are able to beat this team, but as I said, historically that hasn't been the case. So here we have the overview of this series. We had a Karachi hardpoint to start us off, a Rio search and destroy, invasion control, another Rio hardpoint, and then invasion search and destroy. Now, when we're looking at the map set here, the biggest thing for me that I didn't love was the invasion control, just because our invasion control really hasn't been fantastic. We tend to keep things close, but then just aren't able to close it out. So I didn't love the invasion control, but the hard part is I'm not really sure what else the Thieves have to play consistently when it comes to control. That's been their weakest mode, as we've talked about before. So really, I don't know what the substitution would be there for that. But as we can see, this was where we kind of went wrong, and this is how it was in the last major as well. But we started off well in the Karachi. We actually started off a little slow. Obviously, we won the map, but we started off pretty slow in that first map. As you can see by the graph, the Thieves didn't even have a single lead until the last hill, which was the P2. And it was, decent chunk of time that they had to make up compared to where LAG was at. It started off fairly close, and then on that third hill, we can see things kind of just got away from the Thieves. From the Gorilla side of things, you had Diamond Con with a +3 and Flames with a +4. And then for the Thieves, you had Ghosty, who was +3, Kremp +5, and Nasty +1. Joe Deceives had a little bit of a slow hard point. He did as well in the Rio, I believe. He was playing a little slow, it seemed like, or he just wasn't able to get as many kills as what we're used to seeing. But he did make it up, and we will get to that down the line. But yeah, it was a really solid bounce back from the Thieves because as we said, they started off, on the back foot pretty much for the entire map. And to be completely honest with you, going back and watching back the series, I don't really know how the Thieves were able to win this. Like, they were up by so much that the way the Thieves were able to come back and end up winning just kind of boggles my mind a little bit. Now, obviously, as I've said before, I don't play at a super high level, so some of this stuff is a little more confusing for me. But the fact that they were able to somehow chain a couple of hills together to get just the right amount of points to inevitably get over the hump at the end when it felt like the kills weren't necessarily fully going in our way. It was kind of being traded out for the most part. So I don't really know how we were able to stop them at that 243 mark and finish the map at 250 to 243. But no complaints out of me. We won the map and showed a lot of ice doing so. As we said, Joe Deceives didn't have the best, but he started off really, really slow and actually bounced back a lot. He made some really big plays. I think was able to get a streak at one point, which helped them a little bit on the P1. Didn't really do much, but I think it gave them a little extra time to kind of just set up. So maybe not kill impact wise, but just timing and everything like that really helped him out. So that was a big plus. As we said, even though he went negative, he did have some really impactful plays to kind of close out that map. Going into this map 2, we have the Rio Search and Destroy. Thieves were up 6-3, or they ended up winning 6-3. I mean, the Thieves Search and Destroy has actually been really solid. That's something that I feel like I've been really happy with from a fan's perspective, knowing that, especially when we're taking a lot of games to a game 5, it's good to know that your search is a solid kind of foundational piece for this team. Now, how will it compare when we play against a team like FaZe, Ultra, New York, 3 teams we have to play in the split? I'm not 100% sure. But being able to win a search and destroy when we need to is really, really good. As we can see here, Kremp had a really solid search here. Nasty did solid as well, +8 and +6. And then the only guy positive for LAG was Fame. I give Kremp a lot of credit, and I want to give him his flowers a little bit, because I know after the major he was getting a lot of shit. We might have given him a little bit of shit, but if we're gonna give him shit, we got to give him his credit too, and credit is due after these 2 series. As we said, in that first hard point, he was a +5 with a 1.26 KD, and in this map 2, he had a 3.0 KD. Like, he's doing the things that he needs to do now, and hopefully we will see that when we get to LAN. Hopefully we'll see that against some of these higher level teams that we face off coming up in the major. But huge credit to Kremp. I feel like he deserves that credit. He looked completely different in these last 2 matches, and I'm really hoping to see that continue as we go along throughout this major. But he had a play. I remember specifically he hit the flank and was able to pick up 3, and then the next round after that hit another flank and got 2. So he was making some really smart plays and then was getting the kills on top of it. And I mean, the dude was shooting laser beams, so a ton of credit to him. As we can see, this was the breakdown here of the win-loss pattern. As we can see here too, match MVP from Kremp. Much deserved. Beat them out on kills. Opening duels we didn't, though, which is kind of surprising. The fact that they were able to get 6 first bloods to R3 and we were still able to win 6-3 is kind of impressive. The Thieves were able to kind of clutch up in certain situations. There were a couple, I think there was a 1v2 at one point, and then there were a couple 3v2s, I believe, that the Thieves were able to capitalize on and close out the round. With that, we had a 2-0 lead going into the invasion control. This is where, like I said, not necessarily my favorite part of this series, just because we know how their control is. We know that invasion control specifically hasn't been ideal for them either. But for the most part, they actually didn't play it too bad. There were a couple situations where it was still kind of like, okay, what are we doing? We didn't learn from last time. But for the most part, they did pretty solid. Unfortunately, there was a reset on this map. I don't really know the reasoning why, but the Thieves actually came out and won the first opening offense, I believe, and then there was a reset. And as we can see, the Thieves ended up losing 2-3. So I don't know what the reset was for. I don't want to, put blame on it or anything like that, but there's a possibility the Thieves win that instead of losing 3-2 because they won the opening offense. Because when they reset and the Thieves went back to offense, that's where LAG kind of picked it up and they were able to put the Thieves into a little bit of a spawn trap and take that first defensive round. And then things were kind of back and forth from there. The Thieves actually got defense, which is, I think, kind of the most frustrating part about this is the Thieves were able to get defense on the round 5, and they just kind of had a moment where they got all 4 dead, and LAG was able to hop into the point, and the Thieves couldn't really get there. So that was really unfortunate. There was another situation, I believe, in maybe round 2 or 3. I want to say it was probably 3, where it has to be 3, yeah, because the Thieves were on the point. They had a 2 stack at least, and nobody was looking behind them, so they were able to just come up and kill them. Like, they didn't have people looking in opposite directions to make sure they were able to pick up that side of the point, which is something we saw happen in one of their last invasion controls as well, where they lost. So that's that moment where I say it's a little frustrating that they didn't pick up on that kind of thing. Obviously, heat of the moment, things are going to get a little chaotic sometimes. So, you know, it is what it is. But that's something that I would like to see kind of get fixed down the line, and hopefully it does. But as you can see, the Thieves had more ticks when it comes to the attacking rounds. So they were doing a decent job on offense. They just weren't able to close it out on that final defense. I believe Ghosty actually tweeted out something saying that, like, map 5 or round 5 defense for control is like a curse. Like, if you get defense in round 5, it's almost worse than it is offensively, despite what the numbers might say. But anyway, going into this map 4, I actually thought we had a solid opportunity at this Rio Hardpoint because the Thieves have been playing Rio Hardpoint pretty well. And obviously we lost the invasion, but it was pretty close, so I felt like there could be a little bit of momentum there still. And with our hardpoint having been more of an improvement recently, I really thought there was a good opportunity for the Thieves to take this map here. Unfortunately, they did not. We lost at 250 to 218. Ghosty was the only guy positive. Joe Thieves, again, had a really rough one, a minus 15, even worse than the Karachi. I don't think he really had much of a bounce back in this one. Crump was minus 4, and Nasty was minus 7. So just really tough. Going to be hard to win a map like that, and I think Joe knows that. He even tweeted out himself that he had a rough hardpoint series. Both of his hardpoints weren't ideal, and then everybody from LAG was positive. So as we've said before, when the other team is fully positive, it's going to be hard to beat them in a hardpoint. And then as you can see here, we have the flow chart where it was a lot closer than the first one, that's for sure. And give them a ton of credit because, as we said before, I feel like if you have a situation where a player is really negative and you're still being able to kind of battle through when the rest of their team is positive, that means you have to be doing something right teamwork wise. So it's a good sign that their teamwork seems to be a lot better, because otherwise they wouldn't have been this close with situations like this. Obviously their kills lower here, and again, still pretty close, keeping it pretty close. They were dealing less damage, and that's just kind of how it went. But Thieves were unfortunate enough to fall in this one. But we go to the map 5 invasion, which I feel like has been pretty decent for the Thieves. As we can see here, Ghosty was only a +1, but Joe Thieves, this is where, as I said earlier, Joe Thieves kind of made up for it. He turned up in the search and destroy, going +11, 13, and 2, which is crazy, dude. Absolutely crazy. And nobody on the Gorillas was positive. We had more First Bloods, less plants, but we had 3 defuses, which LAG had none. Obviously 6-1, that's a big difference. Joe Thieves had a big 1v2. I believe they had another 2v3, and they seemed like they were making a lot of the right plays. Kremp, I believe, had a flank that was able to kind of open up the map a little bit, allow for them to come back in and get the defuse on the post plant. So the Thieves really just played pretty solid on that on that invasion search, and obviously it helps when you have a guy who goes 13-2. So yes, Joe Deceives didn't have the best hardpoint series, but he really picked it up when it mattered in that invasion search and destroy. So I give him a ton of credit for that. We absolutely needed that, and that brought us to that 3-2 victory where we started off 1-0 against LAG. Big win from us. As I said before, yes, LAG may not be the best team in the league, but historically we don't play well against them. So in my book, that's a big win from the Thieves. For this Boston series, as we see here, the Thieves were able to take this one 3-0, which is absolutely huge. Yes, Boston is the worst team in the league statistically. I know that. But the Thieves have not been able to 3-0 anybody. So the fact that we were able to get a 3-0 is absolutely huge. They started off pretty slow again for the first like couple hard points, like first hard point or so. So maybe about the first hard point, they started off a little slow, and then they slowly started to ramp it up. And here, Nasty was the only one who was negative, but he was dealing just about the same amount of damage as everybody else on the team. So I really don't worry about this negative score line. I want to throw this out there for Nasty's sake. I feel like this guy's getting joked, man. Like he's dealing so much damage in games, and his stat lines, like KD wise, are just so much lower than a lot of the other guys. And I feel bad for him because like there was a moment in the Rio search, I believe, where they were watching his POV, and the amount of damage he dealt without getting the kill was actually insane. I feel really bad for him, man. Like he deserves a ton of credit, and I think people who like recognize that he's dealing a ton of damage do give him credit and they give him his flowers. But it just sucks, man. It doesn't show up in the stat line, but he's doing the right stuff, it seems. I feel really bad that he's not always able to convert them to actual kills. I'll have to look at like some of his series where he has a negative KD, but a pretty solid damage scoreline, and see kind of like how many kills he missed based off of how much damage he put in, you know. But either way, 3 guys on the Thieves, even or positive. Ghosty went absolutely nuclear with a 32-20 stat line going plus 12, and Beans had a solid map. I believe he had a decent series overall. I'm not 100% sure though. And then Snoopy broke even. Snoopy also, I think, had a decent series as well. And as we can see here, it was pretty close starting everything off, and then the Thieves slowly were kind of able to gain a little bit of traction and, you know, pull away with this one towards the end. Damage was about even between the teams, but the Thieves had the highest lead and the longest hold, and slightly more kills than Boston did. Really not too much here that I can think of off the top of my head that was like really big. I believe Joe Deceives had a streak at one point. He did make a big play towards the end of the map where he was able to pick up the anchor for Boston. I believe it was Major Maniac back in the spawn headed over to the last hard point before the rotation reset. So that was a big play out of him. Was able to get a streak. Unfortunately, he did team kill on the streak, which didn't help. It got the Thieves kind of off the point for a little bit to where they weren't able to win on this last hard point here. They had to rotate into the first hard point after the reset, and were able to close it out there instead. But that's a big moment that I remember off the top of my head. Going into this search and destroy, it was a lot closer than what I would like to see, especially knowing that Boston isn't a great search and destroy team. Now, it could be a little different because before they did not have Major Maniac, and I know Major is a better S&D player than maybe what they've had before. So that could have a little bit of an impact right away, just because, as I said, Boston really wasn't a great search and destroy team. I still think probably isn't great. But obviously, I don't think the Thieves should be winning 6-4. I think this should be a little bit of a bigger disparity. I think the Thieves should have handled them a little more, but they did a good job still being able to close out the search and destroy. It doesn't necessarily matter how many wins the other team gets. It just matters if you close it out. And I think they did a good job of being able to do that. Ghosty 11-6, another solid map for him. Kremp 10-8, solid map for him. And then Nasty 7 and 6 with a +1. And Joe Deceives was only -2 with 5 and 7. So really not terrible, especially if he's often the entry guy. Naturally, he's going to have more deaths. But the only guy positive for Boston was Snoopy, who was 12 and 8, and Beans had a stinker going 2 and 10. I saw I saw and heard people in the chat were going nuts over the fact that Beans went 2 and 10 there. Gave him a lot of crap, but here's the breakdown. Thieves were able to take the first two and then just kind of traded the rest of the way. We beat them out in kills and opening duels, and then had more diffuses as well. But there was a good amount of diffuses, so not a lot of great post plant holds from this, which again don't necessarily love out of the Thieves, but the fact that they were able to, break the other team's holds, I think was really good as well. So yeah, I believe there was another moment on this one where Kremp was able to get a flank and he picked up a couple. But yeah, he made some big plays. Ghosty made some big plays. I think he had a couple on the flank as well. Obviously, as we see here, the +5 and the +2 with 10 and 8 and 11 and 6 is really solid in Search and Destroy. Tough to win when you have two guys who are dropping double-digit kills in Search and Destroy. And Nasty not too far behind him with 7. So really solid out of them. As I said, just wish it maybe would have been a little more dominant from the Thief side of things, but we'll take the win. We move on to the high-rise control, where I tweeted it out before this series started, and seeing this map rotation here, this map lineup, I thought the Thieves had a chance to 3-0 here. I figured at the very least they would get a 4-1 or a 3-1, sorry, and make it to map 4 where they play the Rio Hardpoint. And the only one I thought they would lose would be the control high rise. I figured Vista is something that they've been pretty solid at, and I feel like based on how they came off of the LAG series that they were just going to play a lot better than Boston would be able to keep up with. And I think that's exactly what they did on Vista here. And then Search I wasn't really too worried about because, as I said, their Search has been really solid, and Boston's has not. Obviously, it was a little closer than what I would have anticipated, but we were still able to win it. So at that point, I figured our biggest concern was going to be this high-rise control, just based off of the fact that the Thieves haven't done well in control. But where I thought everything would go right is that they do play high-rise the best. At least that's how it seems. They tend to do a pretty good job of trapping teams in their spawn and really getting them in the blender on defense. So I figured if the Thieves were able to do something like that they could kind of take the lead pretty quick. And at that point, especially after winning these two, that the morale would just be kind of shot from Boston. And I think that's exactly what happened. I was doing not really a watch party, but I was watching it with one of my friends, and I even mentioned that this was like the first time in a while, I believe, that we've seen all the Thieves players in the positive. A lot of times we'll have at least two guys in the positive, and then one will maybe break even, and one guy will be negative, or two guys will be negative. But this time, everybody was in the positive. Yes, Joe Deceives was only +1, and Nasty was only +2, but having all of them in the positive is really nice to see. Definitely a sight for sore eyes. And Beans was the only guy from their side of things to go positive with a +3. Major Maniac was -13. Definitely not ideal from them. And Snoopy was -1. So they did exactly what I thought. They were able to take control of the defensive side of things and really prevented Boston from being able to get to the point. The biggest thing that I saw that really sucked was that I felt like the Thieves should have won one of their offenses that they missed out on, the round that Boston was able to get. They had basically 3 people on the point with a couple seconds left, and I really thought they were going to cap the point before getting that extra time, and Snoopy was able to just pop a crazy 3-piece. So that was the biggest thing for me, that I felt like, he probably shouldn't have been able to get a 3-piece there, but at the same time, some of the Thieves players were probably a little weak going into that or those series of gunfights, because it was multiple, not just one. But Snoopy was able to go big, clear those three guys out because Snoopy was the last guy alive. So to me, it just felt like they got to be able to pinch on Snoopy and close that out. But uh, either way, he ended up getting traded out, and then whoever else was last or first coming off of the respawn came in and closed out the Thieves player. So they were able to win that offensive round. But other than that, the high rise control looked really solid, especially compared to our other controls that we've played. As we mentioned with the invasion, they don't play necessarily bad on it, but there's a lot of mistakes that I feel like still need to be fixed and still need to be worked on. But they definitely seem to be cutting down on those mistakes, so that's obviously a really good sign. Hopefully, by the time we get to like champs time, that those things will be locked in, and we'll kind of have a strong grasp of what we need to do on a variety of maps, because that's going to be our best opportunity to win series, is having a solid map pool, a good rotation that we can use, and not just sticking to a couple of the same maps overall. Yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode of the podcast. We will have another one out after the next weekend matches. And now that I have a little bit more time on my hands, I'm going to try and maybe do some better uh, editing and all that kind of stuff to make it a little more appealing for the audience and for you listeners. So I appreciate everybody for following the channel, whether it be here on Twitch, on Twitter, or on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and hopefully I can keep making some good content, and it just keeps getting better and better. So yeah, that's gonna do it today. Hope to see you guys in the next one, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Peace.